The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Vince intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz.
Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man.
Over to Taylor, he skips into the lane, puts up a floater, it drops in.
Let's get it started with your hosts, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Welcome back, folks. What's going on? It's another edition of Red is the New Orange. Regular season drawing near a close. And after Syracuse had the weekend off, the Orange back in action tonight, taking on the NC State Wolfpack. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, Johnny Gadamowitz. Ian Unsworth with you as always. Here is part of the Field of 68 podcast network. And we know that things in Syracuse land have not been too great this season, to say the least. But the college basketball landscape, the storylines all over the place have been really outstanding. I mean, you want to talk about whether it's been SEC dominance all year. How about the St. John's resurgence in the Big Apple? The Kansas disappointment with what the Jayhawks were looking at coming into the year. There's really storylines everywhere you look. What's the Duke ceiling going into March as far as the ACC tournament and then March Madness is concerned? Field of 68, they're your one-stop shop for all of it. So make sure you keep tabs with what they are doing over the course of the next couple of weeks, taking you right up into Selection Sunday, and then, of course, through the tournament. Back to talk some Syracuse hoops, Ian, as the Orange, the weekend off.
Yes, we are.
Maybe it's a good thing that they had the weekend off, because Syracuse now had a chance to catch its breath before they gear up to take on NC State after a rough pit loss midweek last week. I guess the good news is that NC State has had about as a letdown of a year as you could possibly imagine. 1 year after a trip to the Final Four, Kevin Keats' Wolfpack are just 4-12 in the conference. They haven't won a game on the road all season. They endured a 9-game losing streak earlier this year. Much like Syracuse, and this is a program that kind of has problems every which way you turn.
Yeah, North Carolina State, I mean, we talked about it last year. This team last year wasn't amazing, but they found March magic in the big belly of DJ Burns and rode him and that Boss Man D'Lo song all the way to the Final Four. Michael O'Connor makes some huge shots, and everyone else, the role players, the DJ Horns of the world. Well, he wasn't necessarily a role player, but he had some nuts games, and it seemed like his ankle was hurt every single time he stepped on the floor. That's what happens when a team finds the March magic. But it only lasted through March. And Kevin Keats is still around, and it's tough to rebuild after something like that because you got a flash in the pan. You got DJ Burns playing the best basketball he will ever play in his life. And now you look at North Carolina State, 4-12 in conference, 11-16 on the year. You've got Kevin Keats around for a couple more years, which, depending on who you talk to, and I talked to a lot of Wolfpack fans, being that I was living in Durham and Raleigh for the past 2 years, they were not happy with him. Alums, students alike, they wanted him gone. So he's going to be around for a little while longer. The thing is, though, even with all this moping and despair North Carolina State fans are doing, look, Syracuse isn't doing any better. NC State is 4-12 in conference. Syracuse is 5-11 in conference. If Syracuse loses, North Carolina State will have the inside track to be the 15 seed in the ACC tournament. Yes, Syracuse will miss or be on the outside looking in of the ACC tournament if they lose against North Carolina State. So the game matters.
It's huge. It's huge for implications. It's about as big of a game from an implication standpoint between a 5-11 and 4-12 team that you're ever going to find. The way the bottom of the conference looks right now, you've got Cuse and Cal each at 5-11, NC State right underneath them at 4-12, Boston College also 4-12, and then Miami really in the cellar at 2-14. So those bottom three, they are on the outside looking in, and it is not unrealistic to say that if Syracuse loses this game, they could very well find themselves in those bottom three. Final three games for the Orange: Virginia Tech, SMU, and UVA. I think those are all games that, at least Virginia Tech and Virginia, you'd call winnable, as SMU I know is having a very good year, so that's going to be an uphill battle. So it's not to say that if you lose this game, it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to be on the outside looking in, but you'll have to make up some ground and make up some legwork over the course of the final couple of games. I'll go out on a limb here, Ian, and say it that I don't think missing the ACC tournament would be the worst thing in the world right now for Syracuse, because I think it would kind of serve as a little bit of a wake-up call, which is what this program needs. I know there's all sorts of, NIL initiatives that are ongoing, and I believe Syracuse Athletics put out a video today of athletic director John Wildhack with Voice of the Orange Matt Park discussing some of those new plans as far as how fans can get involved and where they can contribute to, tangibly have funds for these now general managers to work with, and obviously the men's hoops program bringing in Alex Klein to run that. I don't know. I think as much as missing out on the conference tournament is an indictment on the program, look, that indictment has already been served. Everybody knows. All you got to do is look around the national discourse with what's going on with Syracuse, and that picture is crystal clear. So how much more does missing that tournament actually mean than the narrative that's already out there? I don't think it would be that much worse. I think it's already rock bottom. Let's progress that conversation. Let's speed up that process. And if missing the conference tournament is a way and a means of doing that, sign me up.
Okay, so we had a lot of different directions planned at the beginning of this episode. We got to talk about North Carolina State. There's a game going on, right? We're going to grade this player's seasons. And we also got news of a Hubert Davis contract extension recording this Tuesday night. Speaking of which, Riley Davis and I, a couple weeks back, had a really good conversation about the similarities and differences between Syracuse and UNC as sort of flailing dynasties at the moment. So go back a couple episodes back in the log there and check that one out. Spotify, Megaphone, Apple, wherever you listen. But I think, Johnny, you directed us to the Mike Waters article that was put out earlier this week about Syracuse's lack of NIL funding and how it impacted their progress in the transfer portal. So where does Mike Waters start? It's with Kadary Richmond. Apparently, there was interest in going back. Syracuse offered $700K. St. John's offered 1.2 mil. All right, $500,000 difference. Yeah. Man, I mean, Kadary Richmond, no one has to make photo edits of Kadary Richmond in an orange uniform. Like, that happened, right? That guy was on campus, and there were choices made that led him to leave. That's the end of the discussion there. I don't think it's much of a other confusion. Would it be nice to have him back? Yeah, but he left. He left first. And there are all these other sources about the potential of NIL funding here. And, Syracuse is slow to adapt in the NIL game. Like, I don't know, man. If guys are asking for $1 million, at a certain point, you get, like, the buck has to stop somewhere. If Syracuse is going to go all out in the portal, like, getting all these mid-major dudes and trying to spread all the funds amongst 5-6 different guys like the Orange did this year didn't work. So I think regardless of the amount, what I'm trying to say here is regardless of the amount of money Syracuse has, it's about how you're using that money. Are you going to go get one program-changing player or maybe two? Or are you going to try to fill out your roster with transfers? I think what Syracuse needed this year was one program or two program-changing players. Because we knew with Elijah Moore, with Donnie Freeman, with J.J. Starling, the supporting cast would be good enough. Or at least we thought it would be good enough.
Right.
And even though you add Jaquan Carlos and a Lucas Taylor and a Jair Davis, again, that's still the supporting cast. Which of those guys can you point to and say they have one, and maybe Jair Davis gets one or two? Eddie Lampkin certainly has won Syracuse a game or two. He's also probably lost Syracuse a game or two. Are we going to look back in 15 years on Eddie Lampkin as a program-changing player? No. So it's about the allocation of this money and how you're using it. It's not about how much you have. And again, that goes back to who's using the money, and it's Red Autry. There have been times where we've said he's keeping his job. There have been times when we've been frustrated. We're not saying fire him. But again, when it can't just like the blame just can't be all on the lack of the money. What is Syracuse doing with the money? Because there's money there. I'm going on and on here, Johnny. Stop me whenever you feel like it. Hop in. Okay.
No, well, you're bringing up a lot of good points. And look, we're not trying to cry poor. And I think that's where you were going, in that the money is there. It's just about what you want to put it towards. To go back to your point from earlier, though, about the, hey, one or two big program changers, or you fill out the roster. I think the reason that the offseason kind of unfolded the way that it did was because let's not forget how many guys Syracuse had to replace, right? I think it kind of goes back to the retention rate. Syracuse would not have had to go out there and get the Carloses and the Davises and the Taylors of the world had you not lost Quadir Copeland, Justin Taylor, Benny Williams, right? The outgoing class from last year. And maybe the writing was on the wall with a lot of those guys, and they reached the peak in a Syracuse jersey. But the point is that retention rate needs to be better. If you want to go in on your slam dunk, hey, here's our one or two portal guys, and they're going to be the icing on the cake for our otherwise pretty stable, healthy roster that has chemistry, then you've got to keep more guys than Syracuse has kept around these past couple of years.
And Syracuse had $2 million in budget, or at least that's what Mike Waters and the sources believe. So that's probably enough for 2-3 dudes, right? Give them $1 million piece. Give them, 650 or whatever again, we're not math majors, but whatever, $2 million divided by 3, 6,600 or 6,006. Wow.
I know what you're trying to say.
Yes.
And I think the audience does too.
2 million divided by 3, whatever that is, maybe that's enough to get 3 higher level, maybe not the Kadari Richmonds of the world, who is taking the Big East by storm now. As Mike Francesa said, going gangbusters all over the Big East. But I think you have enough there to at least get 3 guys that are really playing at a high level at this point in time. So, yeah, that's kind of for what it's worth. But you're right, Johnny. Is Quadir Copeland going to McNeese State for NIL money? Probably not. Is Justin Taylor going to JMU for NIL money? No. They just didn't work. Well, Quadir worked better than Justin Taylor did, but they did not fit. So again, we kind of just keep spinning our wheels here, and we go back to the coaching staff. And now it's recruiting. Last time it's the NIL money. The time before that, it's, look at Syracuse getting outplayed here and losing by 30. And so
that's exactly the point.
The problems keep rolling back.
Yes. And there are so many different sources that stem to the problem of too many losses. It's not just one thing. We can compartmentalize and talk about NIL. We can compartmentalize and talk about coaching. We can compartmentalize and talk about lack of execution from a player's standpoint. Everything that could have gone wrong kind of has gone wrong. That leads us nicely into where we want to continue with our zooming out, grading individuals, players, seasons. And our next trio we're going to hit on here is the trio of Kyle Cuff, Elijah Moore, and Jaquan Carlos. We'll do them in that order. Ian, I'll go to you first here as we hit on Kyle Cuff Jr. I think a bigger role than either of us probably anticipated.
Yeah, a pleasant surprise. That's that's where we're going to start with Mr. Cuff. A pleasant surprise because last year he was pretty much a non-factor. Judah Mintz and J.J. Starling were on the floor almost every single game. And we just thought Cuff was kind of this bench guard. All right, maybe it's that, the injury at Kansas. He's never really going to get over that. Maybe it's just the fact that he's a small guard that doesn't shoot it all that well. And, he can give you a little bit, but not that much value defensively. But this year, when asked to provide energy, Kyle Cuff has been the only player at times that has given Syracuse a spark on the floor. All these different games, when you go back and look at the Syracuse catalog, the Wake Forest game, when he shoots 11 free throws and takes 14 shots. Yeah, it wasn't close, but if Kyle Cuff isn't scoring, that's a 30-point L. BC, double digits. Florida State, double digits. 13 points against Notre Dame in a pretty big win for Syracuse, all things considered. You weren't getting that kind of production last year, and you certainly weren't getting the assertive nature on the floor from Kyle Cuff. So even though his role has kind of dwindled off lately and he hasn't really been scoring the basketball, I'll give him a B as a pleasant surprise.
I like it. I agree with you. I'm spot on. I'll go B as well. If I told you at the start of this season that Kyle Cuff was going to score in double figures 6 times, I think you would have said I was crazy. But he did, and that's in large part because he's seen more run than I think either of us thought. And his best play of the season came when Syracuse kind of needed it most, when J.J. Starling was down. And you were wondering, okay, who's going to pick up the slack in the backcourt? Where is this volume scoring going to come from? We knew it wasn't going to come from one guy. You can't make up J.J. Starling's production with one guy with this roster, but rather everybody pitching in and everybody doing their part. And I'd argue that nobody did their part during that downward spiral when the season really started to unfold, more so than Kyle Cuff. So props to him. And again, the fact that he's had as big of a role as he had on this year's team probably says a little bit more about Syracuse as a whole than Kyle Cuff individually. But hey, that's not his fault. So we're going to give him credit where credit is due. Moving on here as we continue along with our grading of individual players on this Syracuse roster. Elijah Moore, and I think he's an interesting one, because you think about the way that he kind of hit the ground running early. And maybe you take some of those performances with a grain of salt, because I believe most of them came against some opponents that, at least on paper, were a lot more inferior in the non-conference portion.
I gotcha. 19 against Cornell,
yep.
24 against Tennessee, the first game Starling missed,
yep.
And then 10 against Georgetown, 16 against Maryland, and only one double-digit game since.
Right. So I think that's where I get Elijah Moore had a potential to be in B+ territory heading into conference play, but has really fallen flat since. And that's frustrating, because when you've got that freshman that jumps off the page and wows you right from the jump, and that development, you don't see an evolution. You see the opposite. You see him kind of getting a little more muddled as the year goes on. So I'll go C+. I'm curious to hear your take on it, but just the lack of consistency, I think, is what contributes mostly to the grade there.
Yeah, I'm going C, and I partially don't think it's his fault. Look at the minutes distribution, man. It's so inconsistent. He's starting then playing 6 minutes, 5 minutes. And even the games where he gets double digits, it's 11, 15, 17. I don't think he's treated like a real contributor on this team. It's almost like a figurehead so they can bring other guys off the bench and jumpstart them, so to speak.
Right.
But Elijah Moore has the potential to be one of the top 4 scorers on this team. And I think we all saw it. It flashed, and he hit a wall. Who knows why? We certainly don't know why, but the potential being there and just not realizing itself this year is a real downer, especially given that I mean, you look at what Ian Jackson's doing at Carolina. These guys were high school teammates, played AAU together. Like
Right.
Elijah Moore could be just that. He was prolific in high school, and he shoots 31% from three this year and is really barely taking them since early January. So maybe there's a bit of a loss of confidence, and maybe it's the kind of thing where a summer in the gym will really change things, right? An extra year in a college weight room, eating and a really regimented diet, projected and planned out by Syracuse to gain 15, 20 pounds of muscle and really get in shape. Maybe that's a difference maker. But man, 24 points against Tennessee. For a second, like he kept Syracuse in the game single-handedly. And that will stick with me. And the fact that we haven't seen that again is a bummer.
All right, so we're on a similar wavelength with Elijah Moore. I have
It's been that kind of pod.
I have a feeling we're going to have a similar outlook here on Jake Juan Carlos too.
Yeah.
I was really excited about the addition of Jake Juan Carlos when you talk about the experience, the fact that he was all CAA at Hofstra, the fact that he was all CAA defensive team at Hofstra too, which I think is something that wasn't really talked about a ton coming into the year, but now you see why. Kind of lost his job in the starting lineup around, early January when you really got into the crux of conference play. And while he has been a nice facilitator, and while he is good for his 4 to 5 assists every game, it just feels like he hasn't done anything to really set him over the top. I think when he transferred here, there was some excitement, as I just alluded to, about what really could be, right? This could be one of those well-traveled guards that's got it figured out and is sort of the engine that makes the offense flow and the offense tick. We didn't get that. And that's not to say he had a bad year, because the numbers say otherwise, but never really reached that fullest potential that I think a lot of Orange fans were hopeful. So again, I don't want to slam him. But it's nothing spectacular. I guess I'll lean B minus just because C plus feels a little harsh, but it's certainly not much more than a B minus.
No, I'm in the C plus range.
Okay.
I mean, if we had to do a number, he's getting like a 77 from me. So right on the edge. The tough part about transitioning from mid-major basketball to high-major basketball is, Johnny, we both called mid-major basketball games. We both know what it looks like. A lot of the dudes who play mid-major basketball are Jake Juan Carlos's size. They are as fast or a bit slower than he is, right? In high-major basketball, it's not that way. Most teams are trotting out guards that are 6'4". I mean, look at Duke's roster. The smallest dude in that starting lineup is 6'5". And they're all fast. Their 7'2" center is fast. It's really tough for small guards that don't have elite dynamic quickness, like Marquise Noel, for example, at Kansas State a couple years back. Like, that dude was lightning fast and could shoot the ball from anywhere. I mean, he was shooting it from Rucker Park to make it in Madison Square Garden when Kansas State played at the Big Apple, or at Madison Square Garden in the Big Apple. You get the drift. Carlos doesn't have that sort of dynamic ability. Doesn't open up the defense by shooting, and can't really blow by anyone. Honestly, Johnny, I think that was the thing that surprised me the most, is like, I haven't really seen, like, all of Carlos's work really comes in the pick and roll. He's never broken anyone down. He doesn't seem like he's got that ability to score one-on-one. And sometimes, even if you're the point guard, you're not the main guard, right? You're not JJ Starling, but you need to have that in your back pocket every once in a while, because someone will throw you at the ball at the end of the shot clock. We've never really seen that. And we've never really seen much layered scoring ability in general. So that's what somewhat disappoints, because yes, the passing's great. Yes, he's supposed to be the pure point guard, but you still got to hold your weight and score. And again, when you're playing bigger dudes on the defensive end, effort and intensity and tenacity only goes so far. You're going to get beat down defensively. And I think we've seen Carlos get beat down over the slate of an ACC season when guys are moving quicker than he is and they're bigger than he is.
Well, that's the thing. It's when you're operating from a standpoint of not being as big and you have a size disadvantage. Okay, what's the area you exploit? You have maybe some explosiveness to be able to blow by guys, particularly as a speedy point guard. Felt like we never really saw that level of explosiveness from Carlos, and I think that's what really contributes to the rankings being what they are. Any closing thoughts, Ian? I know we didn't talk a ton of NC State, but
let's full circle pivot here. North Carolina State.
Yes.
As a team, not very impressive, right? It's Kevin Keatts basketball, so it will be guard driven. We know that Michael O'Connell will do a lot of the ball handling, and there are still some other similar faces. Ben Middlebrooks, one of the best offensive rebounders in the conference, is still around. Jaden Taylor, Marcus Hill are their lead guards, and Dontrez Styles, who played at Carolina and then played at Georgetown. So Syracuse fans have seen a lot of them over the years, is probably North Carolina State's most consistent scorer. But that trio of Hill, Taylor, and Styles have all taken almost 250 shots. The next man on the list is O'Connell at 159, and about half of those are threes. So, again, guard-driven offense. Bigs are picking. They're setting screens. We'll see Brandon Huntley-Hatfield in there after a couple of years at Louisville. But North Carolina State is really guard-driven, and they don't shoot the three well this year. 32% as a team. And when you don't have a big man that really makes a difference, like DJ Burns does, and we talked about this last year, Johnny, DJ Burns gave the other four players on the floor the ability to rest on offense, to sit there and do absolutely nothing while he backed some sorry soul underneath the basket.
Right.
They don't have that this year. They don't have an X factor this year.
Struggling to generate sources of offense for the Wolfpack. Perhaps a similar case for Syracuse. I could see a 64-63 low-scoring, defensive-oriented type game that might not be a lot of pretty basketball. But again, it is a game that both these teams need if they do want to have a 2025 postseason that they are playing for, even if it might not last very long. It is tonight. It is 7 o'clock. It is at the JMA Wireless Dome, so that's good because, again, NC State hasn't won a road game all year. And it's on ESPNU if you plan on tuning in to consume it. After that, Orange are down in Blacksburg this weekend to take on the Hokies, then a trip to Dallas for SMU before finishing up at home against Virginia. We'll be back to talk about the rest of the regular season after this one wraps up. But until then, enjoy Syracuse and NC State. Hopefully an Orange win to talk about at the